Buy with Rob is your best choice when purchasing your new home in the Puget Sound area. Call 360-710-9425 today and get started on the best home buying experience you will ever have. Go to buywithrob.com today.
Have you ever seen a submarine movie?
Oh my God. Operation Petticoat, Das Boot, The Enemy Below, Run Silent, Run Deep, Gray Lady Down.
Ooh, Yellow Submarine.
Yellow Submarine, yes. Well, there's so many submarine movies.
Hey, this is YD from the Hail Evangelist Show, and you're listening to the Podcast 99 Internet Radio Network.
Hey, did I tell you guys I got a goat?
Range mark, 2300. Downscope. They're fired 1,700 yards.
Tube number 3 ready, sir. Outer door closed.
Generated range 2100. Open outer door, tube 3.
Open outer door, tube 3. Open outer door, tube 3. Tube number 3 ready, sir.
1900. Final range. Mark 1800.
Release the Kraken.
Little column A, little column B.
Yeah, baby.
Well, good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you are, whatever you do. A lot of things happening in the world today. Most of them are far beyond our control, you might say. So perhaps it's time we took a pause and thought about life and thought about the laws of gravity, World War II, submarines, a farmer, lives well lived, politics in the news, not so much today. Don't touch that dial, just try to hear me out for a while. The United States Submarine Veterans Incorporated exists to tell stories. It's what we do. We remind each new generation of the dedication, deeds, and supreme sacrifice of the submariners who went before us. One of those stories grabbed my attention this week on a very personal level. Thought you might like to hear it. It's called Wendall and The Kraken. Here's how you get a hold of me. The text machine is area code 209-565-DAVE. That's 209-565-3283. The email is dave@thedavebowmanshow.com. And of course, we're on the web. Just look for The Dave Bowman Show on Facebook, Twitter, iTunes, and whatever non-denominational web search browser you use. We'll take you to thedavebowmanshow.com, where you can get the show live and on demand. Ego biberi kipulas et ali viveri. I drink coffee that others might live. So, happy Friday, everybody. It's, I'll tell you, being a member of the USSVI, the United States Submarine Veterans Incorporated, has been a real joy for me. It's a fascinating thing. I get to sit in a room with people who have shared experiences with me, who have done other things that I didn't get to do, that really, I don't know, it's just an amazing thing sometimes to sit there and hear those stories of things that people have done and people are doing. So we have a very rare situation in our particular group, the Bremerton Basin. We do have a living World War II guy who served during the Second World War aboard one of the submarines, made combat patrols. But those guys are becoming more and more rare as time goes by, and that's unfortunate because, again, it's like our World War II veterans are being lost, and so preserving their stories and preserving what they did is very important. It's very meaningful, and it's very interesting at times. I'll tell you, you go to these meetings and you sit down with people and you start talking to them about their stories, and you learn things that you never knew. I mean, it's amazing to see. And when you're talking about submariners in general, well, it's a pleasure as well. As I said, the United States Submarine Veterans Incorporated serves to perpetuate the memory of our shipmates who gave their lives in the pursuit of their duties while serving their country. That their dedication, deeds, and supreme sacrifice is a constant source of motivation towards greater accomplishments. I love that line because it's meaningful. We're not interested in just telling you these stories because we want to tell stories. We want to tell you these stories so that you look at these things and are encouraged, motivated to do even better and greater things than these men did. And that, well, we did. It's truth, because that's how I got into submarines, reading a book. The book was an abridged version of Clary Blair Jr.'s Silent Victory. And I was carrying it around school one day, and we had a assembly. I guess it was an assembly or some sort of meeting or something that I had to go to. I don't remember exactly what the situation was, but I was in this room, and one of the guys was there who was an older guy, World War II veteran, and he was talking about his service in the Navy and how that translated into his machinery understanding of things, and he had gone on to use that in his subsequent career, which he had been in for, 40 years at that point, and 30, 40 years. And he'd become a success because of what the Navy taught him all those years ago. My Uncle Mick was a boiler technician on destroyers, and I remember the conversation that my dad had with him when my dad was a pastor in Pueblo, Colorado, and the building had this ancient boiler system. And Dad, it was kicking Dad tiny. But at my grandmother's funeral, my dad pulled my Uncle Mick aside and said, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And Mick was able to tell him step by step what to do. And it was fantastic. And so I guess the whole thing was about, how to learn skills. It might have been a recruiting meeting. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I do remember this gentleman vaguely. He was kind of I remember him being tall, but that may not have been it. What stood out was his cowboy hat. Because in Utah, which is where I was, that was it wasn't unusual, but it wasn't normal either, especially back in those days. So I want to take you back in time to 1944. In 1944, the United States Navy was building submarines very quickly because submarines were one of the most effective weapons that we had against the Japanese Empire. And as it turns out, the submarines are actually what really crippled the Japanese Empire. And in April of 1944, Mrs. John Z. Anderson broke a bottle of champagne across the prow of a brand new submarine in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. Now, you don't really think about that very often, but we built submarines in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, which is, you can guess, is on Lake Michigan. There's the Manitowoc River, flows right into Lake Michigan, and the shipyard there where they built these things was just a few hundred yards, I guess, from the shores of Lake Michigan. It emptied right into there. So they would launch the submarines there, and off they would go through Lake Michigan. Mrs. Anderson is actually an interesting character, and I don't want to get sidetracked into stories that are not really related to what I want to talk about, but she is actually the wife of Congressman John Z. Anderson of California. John Z. Anderson is a Republican, minority type, congressman at that point. He will serve in Congress from 1939 to 1953, or 1951, I'm sorry. And he is a virulent critic of the Roosevelt administration. I mean, he just disagrees with everything they're doing, with one exception. He is absolutely certain that Korematsu is correct, the decision in Korematsu is correct, and that Japanese citizens of American citizens of Japanese descent should be locked up. And he doesn't want them anywhere near the West Coast. His claim to fame is that then once he's out of Congress, he will go on to become the Secretary of Agriculture under Eisenhower. And that's pretty much it. His ending is a little sad. He will commit suicide in 1981. And that's about it. Like I said, I don't want to get sidetracked too much on that. But she sponsors the ship. She breaks christens it as she breaks the bottle over it. And the ship, the USS Kraken, is dumped somewhat unceremoniously into the Manitowoc River right there on Lake Michigan. Now, the Kraken is one of 28 boats that will be built in Manitowoc. They're known as freshwater submarines, and they have a war record that is unparalleled. For some reason, these particular boats built at Manitowoc really kick butt. But Kraken isn't one of those famous names that we know all too well, Trigger and some of these others. She's not, she's not the famous submarine that everybody knows the name of or that accomplished great mighty deeds or anything like that. But she is typical of an American submarine of World War II, launched in April of 1944. Meanwhile, in Ogden, Utah, a guy by the name of Wendall Patterson will hear the call of his country, give up on his studies at Utah State University, and he will go, well, it wasn't Utah State then, but he'll go back after the war. But in the meantime, he goes and enlists in the United States Navy and volunteers for submarines. He is sent to New London, Connecticut after his initial training, where he goes through sub school. He serves briefly aboard USS Pike in the Connecticut area there as a training submarine. And then for some bizarre reason, and I'm not really sure why, he's put on this ship right here, the USS Banner, and he is shipped to Papua New Guinea, Milne Bay, New Guinea. And I don't know, that's a bigger ship than I'm used to, but I don't know that I'd want to sail across the Pacific Ocean on it. I mean, that would get old real quick. And he's just a passenger at that point. He's now a commissioned officer. He enlisted in it, but because of his farming skills that have given him a good deal of mechanical abilities, it's quickly realized that he could be an engineering officer, and so he's trained as an engineer. He's made an engineer, and he's sent to Milne Bay for reasons that are lost to history. We have no idea why he was sent to Milne Bay, because they just then turned around and sent him right back to Manitowoc. And on September 8th of 1944, he reports aboard USS Kraken. And the Kraken is ready to get going on its sea trials in Lake Michigan, which is weird if you think about it, because that's fresh water. And freshwater is going to mess with your diving calculations, your trim calculations. It's different than saltwater. But these boats manage that, and they do all that training in Lake Michigan, all that training on the freshwater lakes. And then, believe it or not, they are sent to Nolens via the Mississippi River. These boats, the Kraken, in fact, is barged up. They're put on a big floating barge, and they are barged down the Mississippi River all the way to Nolens, where they are then, like trout, released into the Atlantic Ocean. Huzzah! We get to touch salt water finally. And off they sail. Kraken then goes through the Panama Canal and heads out to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. She arrives there in time to get ready to make what will become her first war patrol as she gets ready to leave to go fight the Japanese. She leaves there on 12 December 1944. She'll leave Pearl Harbor, and she will proceed out into the western Pacific Ocean. This is a generalized map of the area. She is going to spend most of her career, in fact, all of her career, as an American submarine, in this general area. On her first patrol, she will actually go off of what is then called Indochina, what today we know as Vietnam. She is going there in support of, because by this point in the war, in late 1944, early 1945, targets have become almost non-existent for submarines. There's a few up close to Japan, but not many down here at all. And what is down here is sticking very close to shore. They're very small sampans. In fact, United States submarines will begin to, around this time, just start sinking sampans with their machine guns and 5-inch guns because they don't have anything else to do. There's no other targets for them. But what they're very good at, and what the submarines are great at, is getting in close to shore so that pilots who get shot down on air raids can ditch into the water or parachute into the water, and the submarines can rescue them. They're called lifeguard submarines. And so Kraken sits off Vietnam there, and in support of, while she's hunting for targets, which there aren't any of, she on this first patrol will actually not find a single target. She manages to pick up a pilot from USS Lexington. We don't really know much about this. We don't really know what happened there, but we do know that there's a pilot who survived because USS Kraken was there and held on when this pilot needed them. much like the Finback picked up a young Lieutenant JG off Chuichi Jima, who went on then to become, a congressperson, a CIA director, a vice president, and a president, George Bush. These submarines, they saved a lot of lives, and they're very proud of that fact, that lifeguard system. The submarine was, it was what it was. I mean, you're doing your thing, and you're out there going about and patrolling and hoping to find stuff. When the patrol was over, they went back to they became what was known as a Fremantle boat, an Australian boat. Now, the United States had submarine bases, obviously, at Pearl Harbor, at Midway, Saipan. By this point, they were in the Philippines. But the big bases were at Fremantle in Australia. This was one of the forward bases. And the boats that served out of there were very proud of what they were doing. They were particularly effective in the South Pacific. And they really, they really won over Australia while they were down there. But the time came to go out on patrol number 2. And so as she gets ready to go out, she leaves on 15 March 1945. And this time, they're not even fooling around anymore. They don't even pretend that these submarines are out hunting enemy ships anymore, because there aren't any. But the United States Navy is getting ready to launch airstrikes against Singapore and Saigon. And so submarines, including Kraken, are sent into this general area right in here specifically for the purpose of lifeguarding. That's what they do. And off they go, and they do that for a few weeks, and then they head back to Fremantle. And then they get ready to go out on Patrol 3. Patrol 3, which Kraken lives on 19 May 1945, this will become effectively her most effective patrol. She will head down, she'll chase a convoy. She actually manages to find a convoy and chase it down. It's an 8-ship convoy. And imagine, if you will, the whole time they're doing this, that Wendall, that guy from Ogden, Utah that I told you about, he's the engineering officer of Kraken. He's guiding this ship as it's going to and from these places and making sure that all the power works and all the machinery works and all that stuff. And they go on Patrol 3 and they chase this 8-ship convoy. Most of it gets away, but she does manage to sink a small coastal vessel and sink an oiler. She sinks with the torpedoes, so she's not a virgin, as we would say. She also downs a coastal steamer with her guns. And she actually takes on one of the Japanese submarine chasers, a destroyer-like vessel designed to sink submarines, and she beats that thing up. She didn't sink it, but she leaves it pretty much in bad shape. She then returns to Fremantle again to refit and get ready to go out for one last patrol. They don't know it's one last patrol yet, but as they head out on Patrol 4, they're sent to the Java Sea, hoping to find tankers or something, trying to supply Japan with what's left. And in the Java Sea, they sail from Fremantle on 29 July 1945. Now, if you know your history, you know that is literally, 31, 8 days, 5 days before the Hiroshima bomb and the Nagasaki bombs are dropped. And shortly thereafter, on August 15th, right around 2 weeks after they've left, 2 weeks and 2 days after they've left to go on this patrol number 4 into the Java Sea, the Kraken is recalled, told, war's over, come on back. And so they had to actually go up to Manila to check in there before heading all the way back to San Francisco. When they get back to San Francisco, they will kind of hang out there for a little bit, and then the Kraken is actually assigned, however you want to put it, to form the honor guard for the USS South Dakota, which is Admiral Halsey's flagship, as it comes back into San Francisco Bay. If you've ever seen the pictures of South Dakota, when she comes in, she has a big banner on the line and it says, "Welcome home," and there's a celebration. And of course, South Dakota is one of the more famous and battle-scarred ships, and it's Halsey's flagship. And one of the ships that escorts her is this little submarine, USS Kraken. Again, with that engineer guy on there, and Wendell's on there as the engineer. They bring the South Dakota in, and then things start to change. As the war winds down and as people aren't really necessary, Wendell gets out of the Navy and goes back to Utah and starts farming again. It's what he knows. He actually goes back to Utah State, gets his degree in agriculture, and builds a successful farming business there in Weber County, Utah. Meanwhile, the Kraken, however, isn't really necessary anymore. And so she's tied up along with a whole bunch of other submarines and put in what's known as reserve status, decommissioned. Kraken happens to be the one closest to the pier that you can see the whole boat of there. This is a crop down picture. If you could see the entire picture, up at the very top, there's another row of submarines. And in that row, for those of you that are from Central California, San Francisco area, the Pampanito is there as well. She's now a museum ship in San Francisco. Kraken is just going to sit there because really there's no need for her anymore. She doesn't really have anything to do. And as time goes by, even Australia will set up a special monument to submarines that served out of Fremantle during World War II, because it's those submarines that really helped save Australia. And as you can see there, the Kraken is one of those, along with some Dutch submarines and some British submarines and a lot of other boats as well. And anyone that's has an asterisk by it, the Grayling, the Grenadier, the Robalo, Cisco, Barbell, those submarines were lost, Kaplan. And again, as members of USSVI, that's what we want to remind you of, is the sacrifice that these men made in their time in all of that. Wendell will go on and he will do his farming thing in Utah for the next, 50, 60 years. I only tell you this because Wendell died last year. And it's intriguing to me because I'm not absolutely certain, but I graduated from Ogden. I am certain I graduated from Ogden High School. But as I recall that meeting all those years ago with that farming guy with the hat, when they popped up his picture, it sort of jogged something in my mind. I wonder if that's the same guy. I think it was. I can't prove it, can't not prove it. But here was this guy that all those years ago took a few minutes to talk to me about being in submarines. Now I know a little bit about his story. The Kraken will go on to rest as a retired submarine until 1958. And in 1958, she will be converted to what's known as a guppy submarine, a greater underwater propulsive power. It's kind of an update where they give them snorkels and they give them a streamlined mast and they or conning tower and they cut out all the weight and stuff like that. And she will actually be loaned to Spain. And she will become one of the Spanish Navy's leading submarines throughout most of the Cold War. And she will serve Spain until 1982, when she is finally worn out, old, tired, ready to call it quits. And she will, at long last, be scrapped in 1982. Wendell goes on to live until, like I said, last year, when he finally passes away on June 1st, 2018, at the age of 100. 100 years old. He loved his country. He always flew his flag. Married his sweetheart in 1950. She had passed away some years before in 2006. But all those years of running that farm, he worked in soil conservation in Weber, Box Elder, Summit, Morgan counties till 1986. The Weber livestock auction from 86 to 2000. His farm and his cattle ranch still in operation today in West Weber County. Loved his farm, his heritage, the history of Weber County, and he had an incredible memory and could tell you about all the historical facts involving his county and his farm. He left all his children behind with a fantastic legacy that they can carry forward. And in the end, he did something that really I kind of like the idea of doing. He donated his body, 100 years old. donated his body to the University of Utah Medical School so that they could use that to study old age, I guess, and the aging process, and continue to teach people, because that's what he was really all about. These are two seemingly disparate stories. Wendell Pedersen, USS Kraken, and yet they're united in the fact that they were together. Wendell served aboard Kraken, and all those four, he made all four of those war patrols. He was there when they rescued that pilot from Lexington. He was there when they sank that oiler. He was there when they got the message saying, "It's over, come home." He was there when South Dakota and Admiral Halsey sailed into the harbor. And he experienced all of that. And yet he then went back to being a farmer. That's what his first love was. It's what he wanted to do. It was just his country had called him to great service, to deeds, and to sacrifice on behalf of the country that he loved so very much, in a ship that served our country very, very well. That's what we do, submarine veterans. We tell you those stories. There's as many of those stories as there are people. There are a lot of submarines in the United States Navy. We lost 52 of them during World War II. Each had a crew of about 85 men. Those stories live forever. That's the sacrifice we talk about, plus the others who passed away as well in those times. We tell you those stories of World War II. We tell you stories of Cold War service, my time. And I'm sure that the people today have some mighty stories to be told as well, as the world continues to need submarines to help maintain the peace that the world enjoys because of what we did and what we do and what those men have done throughout our history. It's a fascinating thing, and it's an amazing thing to be a part of. It's something that I'm, as you know, obnoxiously proud of in many cases. And when I read a story like Wendell's, when I read a story like that, and I spent, oh my God, I must have spent easily 2 hours today. I found the Kraken's war diaries in the National Archives, and scrolling through those pages, and I didn't read it in detail, but just scrolling through it and understanding that hundreds of submarines were doing these things. And men just like Wendell, who had left whatever it was that they were going to do, that they wanted to do, began to serve their country aboard these pig boats, these boats that stink. These boats, if you ever go down to the Pampanino in San Francisco, you know what I'm talking about. They still stink. 70 years later, they still smell bad. There's something about them. It gets in your soul, it gets in your heart, it gets in what you are, and really becomes who we are. And Wendell was one of those guys. I really think that was him. If it wasn't him, well, it was somebody a lot like him. I can't imagine there were that many former submariners, World War II submariners in Ogden, Utah in 1980, 1981. There couldn't have been. So I'm just going to assume that it was him that I met all those years ago and helped inspire me to go on and earn my dolphins as a United States submariner. Proud of that. I'm even prouder of our legacy, the men who went before us, and the legacy that we have to leave for those who follow. I hope you don't mind. I hope you learned hearing about some stories and things that happened a long time ago, but still change the world today. We don't even know what that pilot, Lexington's pilot, did. We don't know anything about that. What if that guy's kids were somebody important? Things to think about as you go through the rest of the week. It's been a fun week. Hope you learned something. Hope you had fun. We'll be back on Monday for a brand new episode of The Dave Bowman Show right here on the Podcast 99 Network. Take the time right now. Tell the people that matter in your life you love them very much. You'd miss them if they weren't there. So don't pass up those opportunities. You don't want to have that regret. Plausibly Live, I'm Dave Bowman. This is my show on the Podcast 99 Internet Radio Network. We'll see you on Monday, everybody. Have a great weekend.
The Dave Bowman Show is a Slippery Fish Entertainment production for the Podcast 99 Internet Radio Network. For more information or to complain about how the show offended you, the text or voicemail number is 209-565-DAVE. For more information about the show, log on to thedavebowmanshow.com.
Hey, I'm going to go do something productive. I'm going to go watch television.